Magnum Photos is more than a news agency, more than an agency for photojournalists. Is the people who are members of Magnum Photos might have started off as photojournalists, but most of the members now, or a lot of the members now, are documentary photographers, and there's a difference. There's a difference between documentary photography and photojournalism. Photojournalism is all about telling news stories, and very often a photographer will go in, make one or a few pictures, or a few pictures that are one or a few pictures that are used, and come straight out again from a situation. And it's time sensitive. So when last year when you did your photojournalism unit, that your deadlines were hitting the deadlines was one of the criteria in your assessment. So photojournalists work fast and will move on to situations quite quickly. Documentary photographers will stay with the story and dig deeper. And some documentary photographers have been working on the same story for several years, tens of years, 20 years. Magnum Photo Agency is made up of photographers that work that way. It was formed at the end of the Second World War by 4 photographers who had been working through the Second World War as photojournalists and were not happy with the way agencies and magazines were using their pictures, were cropping them and things like that. So they got together and formed Magnum Photo Agencies. Those photographers were David Shim Seymour. This is one of David Shim Seymour's images. George Roger, who was a British photographer. This is a famous image when he went into one of the death camps as one of the first British photographers that went in on liberation. This photograph particularly, he talks about how he had to question his own ethics as a photographer because he found himself making a photograph of dead people that formed a pleasant composition. You have to question what were your motives in this case. Very difficult not to make pleasant compositions as a photographer because it becomes ingrained. Henri Cartier-Bresson was one of the founders and you know all about Henri Cartier-Bresson. We've talked about him a lot. He's quite an important photographer of his time and the decisive moment and all that. That's a famous picture that you all know of the guy jumping over the puddle. That we know that he photographed that through a hole in the fence. And the 4th member was Robert Capa. Robert Capa was quite an adventurer as a photographer. Made the famous picture, The Death of the Loyalist Soldier, which is controversial in that some people say it was set up. But Robert Capa really was instrumental in the forming of Magnum because he was a heavy drinker, he was a gambler and a womanizer, but he gambled on horses, and the money that he won on the horses was the money that was used to set up the agency. Also, the name Magnum came from the champagne bottle, Magnum champagne bottle size, and it is all connected with the lifestyle, particularly Robert Capa, but all 4 of them really. So lots of iconic pictures were made by Magnum photographers. This is famous pictures made by Rennie Burry of Fidel Castro in 1963. So Fidel Castro became the leader of the Cuban communist regime of that time. Famous picture you'll recognise by Stuart Franklin of known as Tank Man in 1989 in Tiananmen Square in Beijing, when students and young people tried to overthrow the communist regime in China at that time, and the army were sent in with the tanks. This guy he was walking along with his shopping, decided just to stand in front of one of the tanks. And this picture was made by several photographers, all from pretty much the same angle, because there were a number of photographers that were staying in the same hotel and managed to get onto a balcony and took this picture from the same angle. But this is Stuart Franklin's version. And apparently the story goes that the guy was taken around the corner, and we don't know what happened to him after that. And this picture by Larry Tull was taken in the aftermath of 9/11, when the Twin Towers came down. And it's quite a haunting picture, because everywhere is surrounded by dust and destruction that happened. All the papers went everywhere, and this guy's just like, maybe he's picked up a piece of the paper or something, and he's standing reading it calmly. So it's quite an interesting image. I've got 2 videos that I want you to look at after this about Magnum photos. I'd like you to look at those, and then I'd like you to find some more information of your own about Magnum Photo Agency and the photographers that worked, that do work or have worked within the Magnum Photo Agency.